G'day, g'day. So, got Michael Smith with me, and my name is Einar Ingebrigtsen,
Yeah.
and this is the official, now it's called Dolittle Community
Oh,
Stand-up.
okay.
Right,
Yes.
right. So, how are things, Michael?
Yeah, fine, fine. Plodding along, doing coding. If you're coding, it's always good.
Yes, yes to you. Yes, that can't be bad. So, yes, there's been kind of silence, I would say, and at least on the community stand-up. This is the fourth community stand-up that we have, and it's been 3 months, I think,
Yeah.
since the last time, and there's a good reason for that. And that's why I've kind of titled this The Desert Walk, right? So, should we start with actually looking at the agenda a little bit? So, this has been a desert walk, and I will get back to why. And the agenda for today is basically so we've just released a version 1.2 of actually Bifrost, and we will get back to the naming confusion. And there is a few things that we need to kind of just fix for that. So for that release, that was missed. So we need to kind of go back and take a look at that. And there is this mention of a Doolittle, and this show is now called Doolittle. So why? Well, we did mention it in the previous show, but we will get back to what's actually happening there. And we have some design decisions that we need to kind of discuss, right? And it's
Yeah.
basically there's a couple of things. There's word versioning and configuration, and well, we'll see where this actually heads. And
So it's not a design discussion after it's already been done. It's before it's done that can actually influence it.
hey,
Yes. So it's
yes,
not a code review.
no,
We
it's
start to
not.
say, code's fine. I just don't like the design.
Exactly. Now this is ahead of time. It's actually very, very good. It's a good idea, I think. So always good to have multiple inputs on design before we actually commit to it, so we don't bleed for our code, right? And I also kind of have on the agenda kind of a few thoughts on what's actually going on and the vision of the project and where it's headed. So I guess does that sound like an agenda to you?
Yes. Yes. Sounds like a lot to cover.
Yes, but we will be brief. We will actually be fast. I think that's what's going on here. I've actually prepared something I haven't done before, so I'm that could also backfire, right? Uh, so you might notice that we don't have Berger here today, but he couldn't make it, so that's too bad. But he has contributed some of the stuff that's actually new in the 1.2. So without kind of this is the reason for the title Desert Walk. It's been a lot of work to get this version out, and it was actually originally intended to be a kind of a dot release, and it should actually almost be a 2.0 release because there's so much stuff that has actually changed, and there's a bunch of breaking changes. The main point is actually the entire event pipeline. Everything from configuration to actually the runtime and the execution of it has now been changed, and I will kind of just show a little bit about that. And I think that's been the theme, right? And that was at the heart of everything, and it kind of affected everything as well on the way. So, but we do have a sorry.
I was gonna. You say configuration fine, but is it impacting your use of events, or is it more internal?
It's
I don't know.
definitely internal. Yeah. So for you as a developer, you won't actually notice much other than the configuration part.
Okay.
Yeah. So in addition to that, did you do you remember we had a thing called I can populate tenant?
Yes.
Funny story. We put the interface in, and that's it. And that's it.
No implementation. Well, actually, it's probably you can't really implement it, can you?
Now,
Because that's a business. That's a you have to tell us how you define your tenant. We
exactly.
don't know.
Yeah. But we didn't implement a system that actually discovers those.
Ah, okay. So it didn't even use it.
No. So we had a whole thing sitting there looking really neat. And we have some users of Bifrost that actually started using it, and they're approaching me like, it's not actually doing anything. I'm like, that's weird. That's just so weird. So kind of just they were kind of waiting there. So I just had to basically go in and just spend a few hours and just get that done. So that's working now. And
So is it everywhere? Is it on commands and queries and read models and events?
no, the tenant information is basically it is something that needs to be built out more. It is definitely some things that needs to be thought of because it's not really present on any of these. But you can take a dependency to iTenant and be sure that you get the right tenant information.
Yeah.
And the I can populate tenant thing will actually be hooked up and populate the kind of metadata that you want for your tenant. So that's there, and actually along the way also the the principal resolver that we had also the I can
Yep.
resolve principal. Kind of a breaking change there is that we moved from I principal to claims principal, and made it a lot easier to do the tenancy stuff because then you can take a dependency to the principal and actually get the tenant information, for instance, from the claims sitting there. If you have that type of token, yeah.
I seem to remember in my current project, I've got a cast from claims principal to I principal, so it doesn't break our stuff.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yeah. No, so it's more consistent with that, and it's a bit of an opinionated thing to actually do, since iPrinciple is the core interface for everything, but still. So that, and now it actually runs flawlessly on a Mac and Linux.
Oh,
So
are we going to see that tonight?
well, we could. Yes, we can take a look. And it also means it's running end to end on top of ASP.NET Core, and we have everything in place that we used to have for System Web, which is kind of nice.
Okay.
Which
Well,
means it means a lot because we can then actually run it in Docker, for instance, and actually run it across anywhere. So that's nice. The whole thing started out. Do you remember the whole reason for the event stuff?
It was was it not just the bad code? Would you not just say you opened it up and thought, oh, this isn't very nice, I'll have to start refactoring that?
Yeah, that was kind of that was the consequence basically. But it started off with the need for a scale out, basically, right? The RabbitMQ. That was the name of the story. Implement
Oh,
RabbitMQ
yes,
support.
yes.
And that spawned into a lot of things, and amongst others, as we pointed out, the bad code, right? So yes,
You should have just called it the WTF branch.
yes. Yeah, the number of commits into that branch for that particular issue is well, yeah, you will see that it's not just RabbitMQ. In fact, the RabbitMQ implementation came very much at the end, and it took about 15 minutes to implement. So, So something went on in that branch, right? So another fun fact, and I think this is actually really interesting. Um, for the first time in the history of this project, and remember this project started years ago. I would say seriously 2009, 2010, but yeah, this is the first time we introduced logging.
Yes. Well, did we not have a? At one point, did we not automatically put logging in, and it was ridiculous? We logged every method or something with
Yeah,
what was it called? Was it post sharp? Is that what it was called? Or
yeah. We used the post sharp. Yeah.
we used AOP, and we were just overwhelmed with method calls.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So after that, we ran away.
Exactly. So basically, now we have an interface called iLogger, and utilizing I think it's C#6 that introduced that. There's an attribute that you can put on methods to actually get the calling method's name and the calling file and line number and all that. So you don't have to put that in or anything like that. You just call the logger and it has error, it has fatal, it's yeah, warning, uh, yeah, whatever, and it will get all the details for you. So that is now being put into some of the more critical parts to actually be able to trace and debug more. So yeah.
So
So
can you plug in the different loggers or things? Like a is it sequence? You know the one I'm talking about? Sec. I can't remember, but like it's good. You end up going to different syncs, and you can choose where to log to and all that, and then you've got aggregators and all that to put them together, so you can then query your log files.
the default, if you take a look at what you do, is basically there's a log appenders configured. Do you see my screen at all?
No, no.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to actually share my screen with you. That is probably a good thing. So you see everything that I do.
Yes.
So if I do this, will you see? No. Oh, you're
To your
seeing.
desktop.
You see a very different desktop. So let's actually see if I can share the right one. This one. Yes. Okay. So now you can actually see my desktop.
Yes.
Yes. So the thing is that there is another thing called I can configure log appender. So basically you can set up your own log appender. So you can go here and say log appenders and dot and add a log appender basically. And by default it will hook into the default log appenders that actually exist on. We have on .NET 4.6.1, you have debug, right? So system diagnostics debug.
Yep.
It will use that by default. And on .NET standard, there's the actually, what's it called again? The logger factory thing, right? And it will just hook into that and whatever you've configured for that. But if you want to have a specific behavior, you can go and actually just add a log appenders configurator and configure everything yourself. So that's pretty much it for that thing. What you then need to do is basically, if you see the iLogger interface, this is basically what you have to work with. You have your trace, your debug, your information warning, critical, error, and there's an overload for error with an exception, basically. So that's it. So all you need to do is just basically take a dependency to iLogger, and you're good.
Okay. Yes.
And write whatever. So that was a change that came in, right? And also now everything is upgraded to, or as I like to say, maybe downgraded, because I really like the project JSON.
Yeah.
that's been done, and but it means we're future proof at least for the platform. And there's well, in addition to Rabbit, there's also now support for Azure tables for storing events, and also Redis. I will get back a little bit to why the Redis stuff is in there, and kind of a design decision when it comes to package naming. Um, Instead of having like what we had like DocumentDB, we had MongoDB, we had Raven, and they had both support for read models and events. Separated them into two different projects because, well, you don't necessarily have the need to support events for all these, but make it very clear that this is the read stuff. So separate them into different packages altogether. And there's been pull requests from Børge at least, and a couple of others. So some optimizations, startup optimization like the assets manager on JavaScript shouldn't need to go 2 times to the server to know what's going on. And yeah, the command instantiation, basically all commands don't need to go through the IOC. That's pretty heavy because they have a default constructor. So just use the activator. And yeah.
Are people sending so many commands that that's an issue?
No, but it's just a general, just a general optimization, like for even for one command, and that's actually something I want to kind of revisit to see if we can cut down the time, the request time that is spent. So there is a few things that we actually waste, so it can be optimized, but so this helps at least. And also there was a bug fix for some validators composition that was pulled in as well. And of course, I think we discussed this the last time, the improved debuggability. So we got all the source code packed into the packages and PDB files, and making it easier to actually debug.
Oh yeah. That was how Burger was doing it. It was
Yeah. So took that ID directly and just did the thing. There is a bunch of other things that I've seen a few other things that would be interesting to look at for debuggability. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a few things that lets you, for instance, debug directly on the source code that sits on GitHub. Yeah, on the kind of, and you would basically have a reference to the commit, right? And it would know to go to that commit and actually debug in that code. So it's
okay. That's quite interesting.
Yeah. So that's kind of the highlights. I don't want to the full list of things that actually changed is in the changelog. So if anyone's actually interested in reading all the changes, I would recommend going there. But these are the kind of highlights and the bigger, I would say, breaking changes and things that's been going on. Right. So there is this is one of the bigger things that actually came out of the whole refactoring, because remember how we stored events before?
Yes, with the we had the actual concrete type, if I seem to remember. Then we had a thing called, was it logical name or something instead of that?
Yes.
Yes.
And it really didn't work out very well. So if you moved, say something, let's say you wanted to change the structure a little bit, it's very fragile. All of a sudden, the event processors couldn't be found, and they would start replaying all the events, or in our case, crash, which was not good. So this is kind of a way to get around that. Instead of thinking in CLR types, start thinking in actually application structure, and link it back to kind of domain-driven design and the things that we've been trying to get to with this project, with high focus around bounded contexts, and within these you have your modules, and within these you have features, and you can have a recursive number of sub features in a feature. And this is just a way to describe the structure. And this is not reinventing regex, even though it looks a little bit funky. There is meaning to it, and it's very limited. There is good documentation, or at least I hope it's good. I put in documentation for how these expressions can be written, but you can also use there's a Fluent interface behind it. So if you don't want to use actually this format, there is a way to describe this with a class structure, because that's what's actually happening. When you give it this string, it will go to a converter and get an object model out of it.
So here, what you're doing is describing your convention.
Basically, this is your namespace mapper, kind of, because you're saying all my domain stuff sits in namespace that starts with domain dot, and whatever comes after that dot is the bounded context. Whatever comes after that is module, and the minus before it means it's optional. And then comes in the namespace comes feature, and that's also optional. And then comes subfeature, and that's optional, but it's depending on the existence of a feature, because you can't have a subfeature of a module. It has to be a subfeature of a feature. But a feature could exist inside a bounded context, basically. So that's kind of what that is saying. And the star at the end means that that particular segment is repeatable. You can have as many as you want of those. So from that, it actually knows how to translate a namespace into a structure that we can save. So instead of saving the CLR type, we then have something that looks a bit different. I don't have an example of that right now, but it's a string, and it goes through a converter that actually enables you to do as a string on an application resource identifier. And that string is basically, it will contain the application name and then a hash and your bounded context, your module, and your feature, and then kind of a separator thing and the name of the resource, and then another separator, and then the type of the resource. And there are well-known types, and there are kind of these resource type resolvers that exist in the system. So for an event, there would be a resource type resolver for that knows how to resolve the actual CLR type, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a whole thing. And it can look a bit daunting and kind of just what the hell is going on. This is overkill, but there's a good reason for it. And well, we don't want to have CLR types in our event stores because we want to.
No, well, obviously we know that every time we've done that, it's come back to bite us. So you don't want to be persisting the CLR type. You know yourself, refactoring, renaming, changing namespaces. It just breaks it all. So yeah.
Yeah. So it gives us flexibility.
I'm assuming that your design at this point sees other resolvers other than namespace.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll get back to that.
I'm stealing your thunder.
So at the top there you have the application as well. So the application name becomes important here because let's say you were to break up an application into different bounded contexts and actually have them completely separate, and you want to compose them back together, and you want to have a holistic view of it. You would have the application name as unique and everything sitting inside it. So this is going towards that whole microservice approach and actually approaching it very structurally and finding a good sound way to deal with this because it is complex. It is very complex when you start breaking things up, and especially in line of business applications where you kind of look at the application as a whole, but you want to develop that decoupled. Right? So there is a couple of good, who am I to judge? I hope they're good write-ups on how this actually works. And it means that system name that we used to have in configure is now gone. We had a thing at just a public stream that was accessible to everything. That is gone now because we now have an I application that you can go to and find all this information instead. So that and the
so what you have is a structure of your application.
Yes.
Something that you could actually output to say, here's our artifacts in the application.
Exactly. And we can iterate all the types and match up against this thing and get the hierarchy. And
it's almost like a self-documenting app.
Yeah. Yes. It is, and it's. I think it could be interesting potential with this whole thing. Both for documentation, but also just we've been talking about it for years. The kind of visualization and tooling around this, how to deal with this, and I think this is the starting point of something a bit more organized than we did before. I think. I hope.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see where this goes. Can't wait to jump into it.
Well, feel free. Anytime. So the next big thing is this. So remember I said from a configuration perspective, events has changed as well. And this is basically the change. Normally you would, before we had dot events and just dot using files, or using RavenDB, or using DocumentDB, or using, right? That was the only option. And from the refactoring, it turns out Event Store was really breaking the single responsibility principle. It's a shocker. It's a surprise to us all. But it was not so much the single responsibility, but more the, I would say, mixing concerns, because it was dealing with event sequencing on its own. And it was relying on the store being able to generate that for you, which led us down a very complex route. For instance, with DocumentDB, where we had to put in a special trigger thing to be able to guarantee an incremental sequence number for events. And you would have a similar thing if you were using like SQL, and you would have a similar thing if you were using we had for Raven as well. We had to put in a special document that we had to put a transaction around, and it was just a mess, kind of. And instead of having that as a constraint on the actual place where we store the events, or a requirement from the place we store, because looking at something like Azure file or tables, which does not have that, there's no chance you can actually generate anything there. Well, you need to start looking at something else. So it ended up being event sequence numbers, which essentially is able to generate two types of sequences. One is a global sequence number for the event. Another is something that we missed before, actually, which led us down a path of misery. The sequence number per event source. We didn't have a sequence number per event source. We had version inside the event, but we didn't really have a sequence number, which made it hard when we were to replay events and actually also maintain idempotency and all that on the other end. So this makes it a lot easier to actually do that.
Okay, but Was that not what version was supposed to be? We had a major and a minor version. The major version was the commit, and the minor version was the position in that commit.
Yeah. But it's a lot easier when it's just an incremental number to actually deal
Right.
with this when we're looking at it, and yeah. So it's just a kind of an optimization of for doing that. So we keep that
Right.
state around that. We keep all that information on. It is equivalent of the version thing, but it didn't work that well looking at the code. But you're absolutely right. It is equivalent of that.
Well, have you got strategies for producing the sequence numbers?
Sorry for
Do we have, like, for the different event stores? Do we have, or well, actually not for the event stores, but do we have like a here's some built-in strategies that will give you a guaranteed unique incremental number?
yeah, no, there is something, but there is also an issue that is targeting that specific problem because we have Redis support now, for instance. So Redis is not necessarily reliable. It can be a bit flaky at times, and especially for the persistence part, there is no. It can, well, fail, which means it's not something you necessarily can rely on. So the implementation of the Redis one right now forwards, if it doesn't find a key, it forwards the request to the event store. So there is still a thing for getting the kind of highest sequence number from the event store. So the Redis one actually just forwards that. But we need to kind of deal with this in a much better way. So we need to come up with a kind of a better way with strategies and everything that where you put it in, and it can be a kind of a cross-cutting thing because now it's up to the implementation to do it, and we don't really want that. We want a system that says, well, if I can't find it using that thing, I will try to find it using this for reliability. So, and as you see, when you use the events with Redis, we can use Azure tables as well. And at the bottom there, you'll see the RabbitMQ for the committed event stream sender and receiver. Those are new.
So that's, you had to get that in to make the branch name
Yes.
relevant. Yeah.
Exactly. So those right now the implementation is very naive. It doesn't really scale out the way we want it to do because it doesn't really take into consideration multiple nodes and how to actually partition things. So the idea here is to basically get to a place where we use topics, and the different nodes have different filters based on kind of a strategy of partitioning strategy. So that means we need the nodes to know about each other, right? So if a node goes down, it needs to rebalance and things like that. So that increases complexity for scale out. So scale out is not easy, but I do think we can get there. So it's something that would be interesting actually for the two of us to have a bit of a whiteboard session on, to be honest.
Well, I always think in these kind of things, the difficulty is how much is the responsibility of the framework and how much is the responsibility of the implementation. You know, if you're using Rabbit, you kind of want to get into, okay, I've now settled on that, so I should be configuring that and get into using Rabbit, and away from, the framework should just be saying what it requires from RabbitMQ, what it needs it to do.
Yeah.
And then your other stuff, how that runs, how it sets up. I mean, yeah, people know how, or people have been using RabbitMQ. They know how to set it up. It's more a way of giving them an easy way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I did think about something like if you can have this strategies represented in some way. So it's in an abstract tree, something that describes the whole thing. And the RabbitMQ provider would then just translate that into a filter for the topic. And for Service Bus, Azure Service Bus, it would also be a topic with a SQL filter that you apply to it. So something that just describes the strategy, the partitioning strategy, and then it needs to similar to link basically. There's
Right.
some kind of an object model that just represents that whole thing. I think so. That's but it needs to be explored because you have things like Event Hub, for instance, which is an event stream basically, which is different. There's no topics. There's a competing consumer pattern thing, where so you need a different approach to that. And Kafka is also the same thing, which is also a very popular thing these days to use. So I think we need to just have so just be aware that the two of us should be in a room and have preferably a whiteboard to talk this over. I think it's reaching that complexity level. I have a few ideas on how to deal with it, but yeah.
Sure.
Cool. And well, further, the event was littered with a lot of details, a lot of metadata. All that metadata is now in something called event envelope, and there's much more than is actually on the screen, but it holds all the details basically. And you'll be happy to see that there is no ID. There's
yes.
So finally, we don't screw up things for you. So that's pretty much it. I think that's what we want to kind of cover for this release. We spent way too much time actually on it. Hang on. Sagas, this is important. It's actually gone. We've been aware of this. It needs redesign, and it didn't actually work. It was very tightly coupled to the ID of commands and command context, and everything had to go through that. And yeah, it needs rethinking, and it was also very painful to actually deal with because it implemented event store, and it was event source, and it was everything. So every time I did a change in the desert walk, Sagas has to be fixed. Sagas specs had to be fixed. Everything had to be fixed, and it just proved how wrong that design was. So it had to go.
Whenever I've never used or not used Sagas since we first did it. There was always ways around it. There was always ways to just by changing your model, by having like intermediate events of a process that wasn't complete yet. And okay, they'd happened to us, but they didn't mean you had taken the order, for example, at this point. And then when you got to a certain point, yeah, you could then create different events but had the same semantic meaning of here's what happened. So there was so many other ways or better ways to do it.
Oh, definitely.
We were learning with Sagas, I think.
Yeah.
We made it overly complex.
Yeah, and I think there's some potential in the thinking, but I learned quite a few things when trying to apply it at a partner at work, and we just discovered that this is not right, but it's kind of close to some of the elements are kind of close. So yeah, just need to yeah.
If you remember, one of the things was we had the events, but they hadn't been committed yet. They were kind of stored, and the idea is when the saga completes, we could commit all the events.
Yeah.
And if it didn't complete, we didn't commit those events. But then we lost it. It was tried. We lost it. It got to a stage and then didn't go anywhere because we just you threw it all away. And our whole thing is about not throwing away information like that. It could be useful. How many people cancelled out of this process or didn't complete it or stopped? Where did they stop? Why? Why did they go back? That's information you still want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. There is something we're barking up something, but I don't really know. So again, a whiteboard session or two, and I think it can be interesting. So we put the 1.20 in the wild, and a few things came back. Amongst these are kind of the fix the web project to actually get the JavaScript bundle, because it turns out it actually wasn't. It by accident was doing so because I did so just accidentally for that release. So that release is fine, but we just discovered that after, whenever you did changes to any JavaScript, that bundle was not included in the package or in the DLL. So that is needed, and kind of introduced a breaking change. It was not by accident; it was very intentional, but removed the possibility to actually have the on event be called when you did the apply on an event source. So on an aggregate route, for instance, you called apply, and before the behavior was that it actually called the on event, so you had state for that object, if you had, and which was right. And I decided, why would you do that? And of course, you need to do that. So
you get to say it,
it's optimization that went overboard. So yes,
that's your Bifrost 101, I know.
yeah, I know. But I'm I'm owning up to it. So yes, that has to go in there again. It's fairly simple.
We've all done that. We've all looked at code and thought, "Oh, why are you doing that? You don't need to do that. Change it."
Exactly.
Oh, that's why you did that. Okay, I'll change it back.
Exactly. That was day one, right? So, what? You changed that? Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Sorry. So also for come up with a scenario for supporting basically cross origin, and it's fairly simple. Just put in a cross origin support actually for from the script location where the Bifrost script is loaded from, and that should make that whole thing work. And remember how the compose validators were fixed in 1.0, the 1.20?
I can't remember what was wrong with them.
To be honest, I don't.
Let's not discuss what's wrong with them. What was the bug? Because if you start me on what's wrong with them again now.
I don't think they were properly hooked up, and they're still not properly hooked up. So yeah, which was kind of annoying because I had a demo last week, and I was making the point of the cross-cutting concern. I put in a validator for a concept, and it didn't work. I was like, yes, okay, so much for the cross-cutting concern point I was making. Yes, okay, see you later. So this is the thing. This is the last Bifrost you'll ever need. Famous last words. Probably.
So there should be some music there, some kind of sad.
Yes. It's basically the. This is the transition. This is where we go from Bifrost to Dolittle. That transition has already started. There is a core project now sitting in Dolittle. So by github.com/dolittle/core, and that's the core project. And I think we need to kind of discuss a few things, but these are the things that I'm seeing right now as the first things that needs to kind of be done. So obviously the namespace should be just changed. and yeah, there's one of the things that I've been thinking of. Remember, we talked about versioning the last time, and I boldly went out and said we should have a GitHub project for every namespace that we have almost in Bifrost.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And I figured, why not copy kind of the, if you look at the .NET team and what they've been doing, they have kind of this core project, which is the core framework. And I'm thinking everything that sits inside Bifrost is the core framework. So
Yeah.
these can be split up into many projects because we want to deploy many packages. But keep that as one project, and everything else as an extension. And so this is my suggestion, just throwing it out, to actually have the extensions like your Ninject support, your DocumentDB, your Azure, all these kind of things. Just they sit in their own GitHub projects and can be maintained by experts that actually knows that particular extension, right? And it makes it a lot easier to kind of govern project structure and govern the whole thing, builds and whatnot. So, and for the transition, also kind of for this week, we should aim for getting the first version of the NuGet packages out. So all the same package that we have today, they're just named dolittle dot whatever, and also start kind of getting blog posts out and information out on what does this transition mean, and get just general information out on it, and then start building the first milestones inside the Doolittle project, which means retire the issue list on Bifrost, and just take that out actually and just build a new one, because there's a lot of, I think, duplicates, and there's also a lot of old things.
Stuff that, it's just no longer relevant.
Yeah, so I think I want to kind of just export it to Excel or something if it's possible, and have it sitting here and start picking from it and putting it back in again. I did find a couple of tools that can actually do this. So yeah, there's.
I should point out, I'm not actually getting all teary here about Bifrost going away. I'm actually suffering from hay fever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's not like a tears are building my poor old Bifrost.
Oh yeah, there he is with feedback. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, and just get things transitioned over. And there's been a few domain purchases. So dolittle.io. In fact, if you go to www.dolittle.io today, you will get to the documentation.
I'll do exactly that right now.
Yes. Still says Bifrost as part of the transition, but yes. And also purchased the dolittle.chat domain. So thinking of kind of a Teams chat, Slack or whatever. I don't have that much opinions about that. Also, I don't know why, but dolittle.me sounded cool. So dolittle.me, and then we have the existing, of course.
Better than do me.
Yes, that's true.
That's not a domain next thing you're going to click. Certainly not what no chance of it. Have a look anyway.
Yeah. Maybe you should rename the project. Interesting. So that's that, and the things that I wanted to kind of just discuss a little bit was the configuration thing. Kind of two things: the versioning Okay. There's a suggestion, and it's a half sentence, but I know. Okay, I know what to say. So configuration, uh, because you've been pointing this out, I think, in a subtle way, saying the configuration is the only part of Bifrost that has not been very Bifrosty.
No.
And I totally agree. There's something fundamentally wrong with it. It's also pretty much the only part of the code base that is not covered by any specifications. There is not a single spec because it is not possible to spec it out in the way it is today. And it's also very linked to being in code, right? So it's not very flexible. It doesn't open for multi-tenancy in any good way. Even though we have parts like the icon can populate tenant and all that stuff, it's not really been thought through. And I've been kind of dabbling with the idea of could this be, and in fact we actually did this at the very beginning of the project. We did dabble with the idea of providing configuration from different sources. And I do think we started putting it in. So you could have like a configuration database and you can have configuration sitting there and you would just point to the database and it would configure itself. The reasoning behind that thinking is what if you could get to a point where Bifrost is kind of a runtime that just sits in a Docker image, and one of the parameters you give to the Docker image is here's the configuration, and here's you just go, and that would make it also easier to do the multi-tenancy part because you could have it dynamically pointing to different tenant configuration and whatnot. So I think that's something that needs love and attention. I don't really know exactly how. So do you have any? When you said it's not Bifrosty, what was your?
My main thing is one of the uh, motivations or one of the goal time is to keep similar code together. Not in terms of the function it does, but in terms of its the role the code plays. You know, whether it's this feature or that feature or whatever, keep it all together so that you can work with it there. But suddenly our configuration goes off into one centralized place where there's just a big bunch of configuration. And it's more likely to us that we configure stuff close to the code you're working on it. If it's in code, that is, if you're changing out a code, that's fine. But you'd be writing your code there, and then we'd be composing it by finding your configuration and building it up.
Mm.
And what you want to do, I think, is quite often you want to here's a standard configuration, but then let me override it at certain points.
Yeah.
You know, this seems to be quite a common one. Like, okay, use these files, do all this, but if there's some environmental variables, use the last in wins.
Yeah.
So I might have stuff specified here, but if I say if the later one is an environmental variable, use that instead. And if it's not there, that's how you get your saying putting into like different Docker containers and that. Okay, or use these files, use these containers. Running locally on my dev machine, I can stick a environmental variable into the Visual Studio, and boom, I'm going against my local configuration instead.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it resonates a lot with kind of the thoughts that I've been having as well, because it's we've been putting in the I can blah kind of thing. We do have I can configure container, for instance, and maybe it's building on that kind of.
But we do know one thing we're going to hit is it's not going to be quite as nice as the rest of it because this is what's setting up everything. So you can't do all the automatic discovery in that if your container's not configured. So
Obviously, yeah.
there is some bits of it that will have to be kind of, okay, we'd have to just get these things, we have to get this set up, but now you're good to go. And, we need to identify what that is, make that the explicit bit, and the rest of it, when you're setting up your event stores or whatever,
Yeah.
That should be discoverable.
Exactly. Maybe this is a good time to actually take a look at how that is done now with .NET Standard or .NET Core apps. So in your .NET Core app 1.1, you would start with this, and you would point it to startup. And startup with Bifrost now is basically this line of code and this use Bifrost. And after that, Bifrost takes over its own configuration and how it actually does things. And we do have the container creator. So it's actually at that point when you've set up everything, it will do the discovery. So it now at this point has enough information to do that. So maybe that's kind of okay to start exploring. I can configure different things, like we did for this log appender thing. I can configure log appenders. Maybe this is a pattern to follow up on. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe even sounds. Is there any benefit in like having a I can configure, making that generic, and then saying what can you configure? Which aspect? I'm trying to think if there's a place where we'd want to say, okay, let's find all the things that we can configure.
Yeah.
Then the only thing about that is you might get into an ordering thing, and Burger might come back with his ordered instances.
Yeah, that's true.
So there might be something you might want to kind of do there. I don't know. This is me just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
The first thing I was thinking. It's a bit like I'm not sure if I'll actually like this. So the options of the configuration.
Mm.
When you've got your in ASP.NET Core, you can say I have options of this config.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of generic way of handling it. It maybe puts a bit too much indirection in the way for me, but
yeah, but
I'm not sure.
No, I think you're onto something because it is about discovering these things as well. And once you start breaking it up into, so when you take the core project and you start breaking that up into all these different packages, we don't have that centralized thing anymore, and it doesn't really know about the other things. So we need something that it can latch onto. And having a base type like that, and the benefit of this would be, so the benefit would be that an interface like that would be I can configure and T, right? And the implementation would be, well, it has to return T.
Yeah.
Right? And that T thing, well, there's going to be different builders very specific to that thing. So, for instance, actually, like a specific, like RabbitMQ, right, would have its event configuration, and you would have a way to build that specifically for that thing, and put it into the general events configuration. Yeah, I think I like it. Either that, or you need to have like a builder thing. Yeah, either way, I think it could be a very.
What I'm thinking is with the T, since what we'd be effectively saying is here's the functionality of Bifrost, so everything gets its its configuration options or whatever, and then you can okay, so what's all the stuff I have to set up? You can initially just go with this, or else you can then, after you've done the discovery, you can then just say, actually, I want you to use this thing instead.
Yeah.
Don't I'm giving you a hard coded value or something. So use that bit instead of what you found.
Definitely. I do also find another pattern for configuration is that inspired by you and your delegates. So I think I mentioned this before, that I can provide, like this one, I can provide connection string to sender, which is basically just a delegate. This is not necessarily a good example of its use, because I think connection strings needs to be a formalized concept, because you want to protect them. And typically in something like Azure, you would be using Key Vault, where you have encrypted connection strings, and you need a tenant-specific connection string, perhaps, as well. So it needs to be a very different mechanism. But the point of actually just providing simple values like this and just binding a delegate is also something that could be part of some configurators, basically.
Yeah, I find over time more and more I'm just having well, initially it was funcs, but now it's more strongly typed delegates just to tell me what is the service that I need, what do I provide. I don't need to take a full interface with in when I know that I only call one method on it.
Mm.
I've got this one thing. It just makes testing so much easier. Little func that returns a string.
Totally.
Return whatever you want.
Yeah. Totally. I'm with you. Okay, I think that's an interesting approach to it. I'll investigate a little bit and probably bug you on details. Okay,
Yeah, sure. No problem.
makes sense. Then it's the versioning thing, but I think it's uh, yeah. Don't mind the texture; it's just nonsense. But the idea basically is going back to the if we had many GitHub repositories, it's just too hard to govern. So instead, basically, version. My idea has been, okay. Let's simplify this. Version the core, right? Everything inside core has the same version, right? Because it's that one build that spits out the core. So do you see a problem with that?
No, I think that's a lot easier because you don't want to be dealing with. I don't want to have 10 different Bifrost or dolittle things, and for them all to have different numbers. I'm never going to be able to. I want to kind of, okay, I'm updating each one,
Yeah,
but it's consistent. There we go, so I know which version I'm on. I
definitely.
know it supposedly brings flexibility, but I don't really want to have to run it to find out if it's going to work.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I agree. It's not so much that. Well, it does give you flexibility in what packages you do depend on. But I think versioning is. Yeah, we did go over this last time, and I was bold enough to actually say, no, it's not going to be a problem. Then I started thinking about it. It's like, well, yeah, it might be a problem. So yeah, okay. Then I think we just try that out, and of course we can change at any point in time. So it's just try out and see what works, basically.
So, but I like the. I'm assuming your dolittle will have its is of homage to Monty Python.
Okay. What? No.
It's Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Yeah.
Originally, that program it was going to be called It's, and each week the person would die before they got to say the name of the program. That was the original idea. So the program would only be called It's.
Okay. That's so Monty Python. Awesome. Cool. Yes, of course, that was the intention.
See, I know your thought process. I can read that straight away.
Yeah, exactly. You know me all too well. Okay, so that is covered. Future. What does the future hold? And I think, basically JavaScript stuff, blah, 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 blah. Get it up to speed. Uh, the whole idea is to basically enable, people like you to actually use dolittle and Aurelia, for instance, in Sweet Harmony, or Angular, or React, or Backbone, or Knockout, or whatever JavaScript of the week is, right? And that means basically it break things apart so we don't have a hard dependency on Knockout all over the place, right? Knockout is just one of the implementations that is supported, and basically do what we've been doing for Bifrost all the way. Like, that's just an extension. That's a specific extension that sits on top. So of course that does have some implications, because we basically need better tooling than we have today, and we don't. We generate the proxies at the runtime. That's also something that we need to kind of move away from and do it at compile time, and have a tool that where you basically say generate proxies and they're pointed to your assembly, and you say which, well, is it JavaScript or is it TypeScript that I'm outputting, and which framework am I targeting, da, 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 and have more options, basically a pipeline for building these proxy objects.
One thing we were actually discussing was just running it from at any point you want from the command line. You know, it's .NET run, .NET generate proxies kind of thing.
Yeah.
You should be able to just do that, because most of the time, okay, it's convenient to just have them running if you're doing, but people don't want to kind of commit stuff like that, or they don't want it to show up as, okay, these files have changed. So it's like, hey, I know I've added some read models or commands or something. I'm going to generate it again.
Yeah.
Just have it not have to actually run the site to do that.
Yeah, totally. And that's, I think we need to get there really soon. Yeah, we have to get the 1.2.1 out in just a couple of days, and then start really pulling in this whole thing, because it hasn't really changed in quite a few years now. So this needs to be changed. And I did mention the decoupling of the kind of the runtime thing. So imagine having a runtime, and basically with all the application resource identifier stuff that we put in now, it would enable us to say have a runtime that knows how to deal with these concepts, the commands, the event sources, and whatnot, and then have an SDK where you actually do your implementations on top, right? So you would be putting in your definition of your command, your events, your input validators, your business rules, and whatnot. And that would be the SDK part, while in the runtime part, you would have the constructs, the more generic constructs that actually knows how to run these things and knows how to deal with them, which would enable the next point, the cross-language support, right? So having a total decouple, and this is not utopia, this is actually, it is happening this week, the first step of it, at least. I am working on a sample for a partner, a project that will be part of eventually part of the dolittle samples, which is a cross-language project. And we've already got the project up and running with Bifrost, and also on the node side of things. It is a project that has the node side is basically a machine learning thing, and it exposes stuff that will eventually need to be exposed as kind of event sources and things like that. So that's
It's interesting.
It is very interesting. So I think that will be the real sample, because the way we've been doing it with the partner is basically they need something to be proven utilizing machine learning, and they also need kind of a reference architecture for some of their stuff. And this project will serve as a thing that will actually utilize a lot of the stuff that Dolittle will provide, and also at the same time show you really how polyglot persistence, for instance, that you should be storing things in. Like if it's searchable, well, store it in Elasticsearch. If it's this, store it there, and all that kind of thing. And also during the scale out, so it will push forward the scaling out thing.
I'm very interested in the polyglot persistence thing. If I never have to save another training sequel, I will be delighted.
Exactly, and that's it is key to the whole thing, and that's what we've been kind of pointing towards when it comes to the whole project, is enabling those scenarios. And we never had the good sample that actually does it, and I think this is kind of it. So I'm hoping for it. I'm not going to spoil the surprise when it's done. It is done. Okay. So I think that's pretty much it. You asked if you could see it run on something other than a Windows box. So this is a Mac. And one of the samples sitting there right now is just a kind of thing that I've been playing around with. Doesn't really do much, but it's at least I can do. I'm not sure if I've compiled it. So well, let's see if I can do a restore. And yes, we'll restore. And I will just turn off, since I don't have the RabbitMQ support, or it's not running. I'll just do this and go for the file one. And then .NET build, or actually I can do run. So hopefully.
Is it code you're using?
Yeah. Turns out to be very sweet. So we now have, for instance, the mspec runner is pretty good as well. So it's tapping into the new runner infrastructure for running specs or tests, basically, and it enables the same runner to be used in Visual Studio 2017 and Visual Studio Code, and also on the build server. So it's kind of neat.
How do you do that? Is it commands that you configure to tell it where to find the runner? Or?
Yeah, the thing is, let me see. So let's open the specs project and I can show you. It's inside here. So let me see. Where is it? Yes. So we have the runner here. And by actually saying just when you have this, you can just do a .NET test, and it will run. And that's it. And now you're seeing Dolittle outputting, or Bifrost outputting logs, something we didn't have before. So you can see which assemblies were discovered and provided, and it should have a thing running on 5000. So let's go to, I think, this browser, and go to that's it running. So hello from VM, from the view model. So that's the view model being called, and the route is there, and everything is there, and it does execute the command. So if you look at the network traffic, if we refresh this page, you'll see that it does call handle my command. You'll see the result coming back, and we should also see on the log that the command does have a problem, and it actually outputs the exception.
Okay, nice.
Error handling command. Exception was found below. Could not find a path because I didn't configure it properly. And this is actually a good thing. This is where you see the this is the string representing a resource.
Yeah.
So it's the application, it's just, that is the bounded context, and this is the name of it, and that's the type of it.
Right.
So that's pretty much it. It does work. It's just not a very interesting example. But working on that on another place, so we'll be posting that when it's done. So that's pretty much it, I would say.
Covered a lot.
Oh yes, and documentation is also coming along. So you'll find things like how to do a query provider if you're implementing your own type, custom types and whatnot. You'll find details about, well, if you look at queries, for instance, how do actually these queries work, and also the documentation that I mentioned at the beginning, the application documentation, as we've talked about, and how this actually is hooked up. Yeah, all that stuff. So it is coming along. It is, of course, it demands a bit more of my motivation to actually write these. So yeah, but it is getting there, at least. So that's pretty much it, I think. So yeah, there I am. Hello. So that's been a few months of work, and it's finally getting somewhere. So that's fun.
So that was your big walk in the desert. Was it 40 days and 40 nights, or a bit more than that?
Yeah, a bit more. Probably like 60 to 80. So yeah, it was 80. So twice around the desert, I guess.
So that's what you're saying is Jesus was a wimp and I've done it twice.
Well, yes. Of course. Excellent. Well, I think that's pretty much the show, I think. Wouldn't you agree? Or
On that blasphemous
yeah.
bombshell.
I'm so glad we didn't live stream. Oh, hang on. So yeah, but I guess that's it. So everyone, thank you for your time, and thank you, Michael, as always. And until the next time. Okay. See ya. See you on the flip side.
Bye.
Bye.